Hello, hello. I'm a second late or two, trying to get here. We're starting. This is live stream. Wah, back. I'm back in Warsaw, not no longer in there. So, hi there, everyone. This is Clifford Bates. This is our monthly actual live stream for August. I'm back at the Casa, the bookstore. No, Casa, not bookstore. Casa, the office. My wife just came up there. Today has been a complete disaster in the sense of project. I was going to record at least one or two things. I started recording and it was getting longer. And I'm saying, what am I doing? I realized I stopped for a second. And then when I turned back, I went to the next chapter and not for the Schmidt thing. And also, as you'll be noticing, Monday's, I'm warning everyone, Monday's Schmidt thing is 4 hours long. Not Schmidt, I mean, what do you call it? Spirit of Laws, Montesquieu Spirit of Laws, is going to be 4 hours long. And I recorded, I told you about this before, right? It's our chapter 20, not chapter, yeah, book 28, which is one of the longest books of in Montesquieu. And that's, I thought it was going to be 2 hours, honestly. And I thought maybe it would make me 3. And then I realized I saw it, I was like, oh my God. And again, this is one of the things about what's wrong with sometimes doing, people, my wife said, oh, it's too long. And I agree it's too long. But if I broke it up, it wouldn't be continuous in that sense. So therefore, Monday is going to have this monster video, which deals with book 28, which again, this is the last final part. Today, I was trying to video chapter 4 of Schmidt's Legality and Legitimacy, but I was interrupted at a certain point. And then when I started doing it, I went back to it. I went back to the wrong place, and I started doing it from chapter 5. And I didn't realize I was in chapter 5. I get interrupted like 2 or 3 times, even, which sometimes even for 30 minutes, 40-minute interruptions. Because I didn't turn the phone off, someone came in, I should have a sign out saying, don't come in, right? During recording, don't come in. But no, this didn't work this way. This is my life, right? And the person called me about the article. He's the editor of the book that's going to be my article is going to be in. So the chapter is going to be in. So he's like talking about this, and he's talking about his project and he wants to write about. So when I got back to it, and that's when I realized something was wrong. Something I should have been at the end of the chapter, and we have already spent an hour on it, and there's no way. And then I realized, oh my God, I paused for a second. I realized, oh my God, it's the wrong thing. I went to the wrong, and I didn't realize even very early. I went to check something, and I went to the wrong place. So I was doing it very early, and so therefore I was like, oh my God. So I was like, okay, this has to be wasted. I record an hour of recording have to be just thrown out. So tomorrow I will be recording everything. I'm preparing for my group thing. Not this next Saturday. I will be starting my the reading group on Aristophanes, and we'll see how the frogs. We'll be doing 3 books for Aristophanes, the frogs. Then we're going to be doing the birds, and then lastly the archons, or how to say I always get that. I can never pronounce it. The Acarians, which is this is part of the 2 things that demagogues that Robert Butler did in this. During the Trump years, everything was about demagogue. So he did 2 translations, and it became a relatively good seller for translations and commentaries on Aristophanes, right? Because you were a demagogue, and all of a sudden it's going to be red, right? That's the other thing. So that's my today's kind of like, I did 2 hours of work. So tomorrow I'm going to be spending it on Schmidt and do my recordings for next week. Of the 2 chapters I have to do, and that's going to mostly finish up. And I might just spend the finish. Then I'm going to have to record on Sunday, probably the last 3 chapters. We have 3 more books of Spirit of the Laws. And the next book, 29. Remember, one is already done for next week, so therefore I just have to do 29, which is the shortest book, and it's the least suitable for the thing for Spirit of the Laws. So that's what I'm doing. I noticed I'm looking at the things. I didn't get any questions from the last live stream. I was kind of like worried about that. We had a lot of views, 236 views, which I was surprised by. My God, there was a lot of views on it. This is the biggest amount of views for a live stream, but it wasn't live at the time. There were a couple comments, hold on, the comments, I'll check, which I kind of responded to, that's in that sense, I responded to the comment. There was a comment about something and I kind of responded to it. Honestly, okay, it's not doing this. Let's go back and pay attention to it. Yeah, okay. So, as I mentioned, I probably will. So I'm wrapping up both my Schmidt thing and things next week or two. I'm probably going to start with social contracts. I'm putting through it social contract, and I might also then do something on the political science thing. I don't have the book here, but I might do a political science 4 thing about basics of political science. I might do Plato's book 1 of a simple one thing on Plato's Republic, book 1, which in many ways is a separate book in kind of a way because it addresses it's a weird book. Someone said, why don't you do the Republic? And the Republic always is a difficult book for me because it's one of those books that's more drama than that. It's difficult for me because it's a seductive book. It's so beautiful. It is such a wonderfully constructed book. You have to, and that it really depends on the translation you're using, and that translations can really affect how it's understood. And there's double meanings. There's many things going on in the Republic in that sense, the structure of what's going on, and the dialogue and the drama. So I thought about doing book 1 only because it is the 3. It addresses book 1 kind of addresses the 3 issues that I kind of hit up in my last discussion about the forms of rule. Right, this is the whole question of book 1 about what is the just, what is political rule, what it makes just, how is it just, and the 3 claims. And the 3 claims in book 1 are, first the claim of the father, the animentas, which is keeping contracts. It's even though he is the source of the divine, the keeping promises, right? Keeping promises, which is understood keeping contracts. Then the son takes over and then turns it from keeping promises and keeping contracts to helping friends and harming enemies, right? The classic Greek political definition of justice. And then this is kind of shown to be problematic by Socrates, by Polemarchus' account as the war lover. I named it, the war lover. Animentus, the father, Polemarchus, the son, both Syracusan exiles. Okay, that's another thing. All the 3 major interlocutors with Socrates, Animentus, Polemarchus, and last Thrasymachus, right, are aliens. They're not, although Glaucon and Animentus are present, they're not really the major interlocutors in book 1. And the rest of book 2 onwards, it will be Glaucon and Agamentus will be Plato's brothers. 2 of Plato's brothers will be the major interlocutor with Socrates about the just city. Show me the just man and the just city. Prove to me that the just man, that's what part book 2 is. Socrates, prove to me the just man and the just city. What is the just city? And it starts out with what is the just city, right? What is the just city? What is the best city? And the accusation of this, and prove to me that the just man would be, so therefore they have to decide what justice, he says, prove to me that the just man is worth doing. That's the whole argument, right? It'd be preferable to be a just man even though he's impaled upon a stick, right, upon a tree. The metaphor of Christ's crucifixion, right, is a very powerful. This is what impaled upon a tree brings conjures for the Christian reader, right? And this is, I suspect, why many Christians look at the Republic sympathetically in that sense, because they saw that, oh my God, this is discussion of the just man is Christ, right? No, in fact, one could argue that he never satisfactorily proves to Glaucon that the just man is happy or is happy, but rather that the opposite, that the unjust man is not unhappy, and it's horrible. He doesn't prove the positive; he shows the negative, right? In the Republic, and that's the very suspect. That's why the Republic has very competing arguments. First, that of what the city is, and the city and the soul, and defining the city. Then the book two, 3, and 4, you get the discussion of the just city, and then you get, starting with 5, you get the interruption, the 3 waves, right? The way book 5 gives us this. You talked about the 3 waves of argument for that of the communism of wives and children, the role of women in the city, the equality of women. Women would be soldiers, and part would be the exercising with women's, the communism of children, and then the wives, and then lastly the philosopher king, right? That the education of women as warriors and participation of women would be of that, and the communism of women, of wives and children, and then lastly the philosopher king, the 3 waves of the argument, each becoming more outrageous. I can say the last one sounds the most, in other words, compared to the first 2, the third one sounds reasonable, but that's the most radical one of all, right? The superiority of reason. That's book 5. And then book 6, you get and 7, you get the discussion of book 6 and 7. You get the kind of epistemology discussion about this, about the philosopher. First, about what the philosopher is, what the wisdom is, what truth is, and then it ends with it ends. I think 6 ends with the discussion of 6 ends with the discussion of the cave, right? The famous cave, Plato's cave, about epistemology and the question of knowledge and how truth is, And then books immediately following that, and starting 7, beginning of 7, you get the divided line, right? The divided line about this, and then you get the discussion of education, right? That's a little bit of education earlier. You had discussion of education of the citizen, the just city, and the education of the soldier classes, the classes of the city. That's the just city. You had the unjust city, the just city, the origins of the city, the unjust, the feverish city, the city that's 2, 3, 4, 5. You get the whole account of the 3 waves. That's responding to the question of the just city, the discussion of the education of the guardians, right? And there's this Glaucon saying, "Well, tell us more about the dancing. We're exercising naked with the women. That is like the scandal of that, right? That the women were going to be guardians, right? And they're going to be exercising and educating with them and naked together. And they wanted more about that. They wanted, the salacious, and then the quality of women slaves and come, and the slaves, not slaves, women and children and come, and communism. And then he brings the last day philosopher king. That again gives us the discussion about the identity of knowledge and truth, right? Philosophy, First, we get, like I said, the cave at end of 6, the beginning of the divided line, and the education of the nature of the highs and that. And then we get in chapter 8, we get the discussion of the regimes, right? The cycle of regimes, both in terms of the family and the city, right? We get the cycle. We get account of the how the city and the why the city will collapse, and that the city divergence, and the account will count within the account of the family, and then the account of that, and then we'll get the whole account of the tyrant in 9, the book where he does give the life of the tyrant and makes the argument against. And we don't get to just see the promise at the end of chapter in book 2 of justifying the just man, and the just man is going to be happy. It's never really developed. In other words, and it echoes the whole point of the beginning of the dialogue, that Socrates goes here and for promise for dinner, and we don't eat. Instead, we get speeches, right? We don't get a dinner. So if we are promised a dinner we never get. Instead, we get speeches about this, and therefore the failure to deliver the food, the promise of the just man, the promise of the just man is as equally unfulfilled, and the happiness of the just man, even while he's being impaled upon a tree, as opposed to the tyrant, the is as never delivered upon as is the deals promised to Socrates. So therefore, there's a kind of irony here of this, right? There's a whole lot of imageries and ironies of how the play works and starting the whole play. But book 10 is basically the question of what happens at the end, the afterlife, the soul, about what happens to the soul, and the questions of this, and how the dialogue ends in that sense with the myth of error, right? The returning of the cycles, and how it explains how this is going to continue. The Republic is a very interesting book in that sense. It's a very dynamic book, but for me, it's always book 1 is interesting because it sets out the 3 arguments, right? The 3. It's Thrasymachus is the justice is what the strong says it is, right? And while Socrates just kind of turns, Cephalus kind of gets tired of it and wants to go to the gods, and his son takes over the argument. So Cephalus just simply it's not interesting discussion, isn't it? He wants to attain to the gods, okay? And that's Bloom's point, is the gods removed. But to the degree that the gods have removed, the argument of the gods weren't about the justice of the gods, but rather the keeping of promises and the faithfulness. That once that the question of faithfulness depends, and keeping one's promises and keeping one's faith to one's agreements. And what is discredited is the son, who has a different understanding of justice. He doesn't really embody; he just inherits the argument from the father. And that what happens instead is the son will make his own argument. That is the argument of the political, which is helping friends and harming enemies, right? Justice is helping friends and harming enemies. Which then gets the question of, well, how do you know your friends are your friends and your enemies are your enemies? And what do you mean by harm? Right? This classic Socrates's kind of mechanism of making someone define that, and showing how the definition is not valid, or the argument does not hold water, right? The famous Socratic approach, right? Of making someone take a definition and then showing the contradictions in a definition. And by this, he shows the question of, well, what do you mean? Wouldn't it be better to, what do you mean by harm? Is, you can never really harm or just, that's that discussion of harming, what harm is and what harm not. Socrates himself makes the famous argument in the Apology that you cannot harm. Cannot really do harm. Only people do harm is yourself. You can harm yourself, and that's it. When someone imposes penals on it, is not the highest. They can harm your body, but not harm your soul. Only you can harm your soul. That's the famous argument of and someone else can harm you by getting you to harm yourself, in that sense, to harm your soul. You're the only person who can harm yourself. So therefore, this is that from the Apology, the argument of that argument, which defends that you can never really harm, and that the death of the body isn't necessarily the greatest evil, the greatest pain. So the greatest punishment in that sense, the punishment should do what do you merit, not punishment. Again, I go see my dialogue on I have I think a 3-4 part dialogue on Plato's Apology back in my archive. But Polemarchus kind of gets defeated by arguments, and it is Thrasymachus who gets embarrassed by does not really gets defeated. He blushes. I mean, Socrates gets to him to be embarrassed, and that, in other words, Socrates in the development of argument makes Thrasymachus blush famously, and once he makes thus he tames Thrasymachus. He's this angry guy, very angry, aggressive thing against Socrates, and then by using in Thrasymachus, there's kind of the thumos, right? The thumos. Thrasymachus is also famous because in Aristotle he was mentioned of Thrasymachus as a demagogue, right? He is a demagogue in that sense, right? A popular leader in that sense, a leader in a democracy that led to a democracy going into a tyrannical kind of regime, a democratic regime, but ruled like that. Now, Socrates embarrasses him, and that after that, from the embarrassment, he becomes tamed, right? In other words, after the blush and after that, he becomes kind of, Socrates tames him and gets him to use it. Now, there's a whole reign of students of Strauss and other people like that who argue that really Thrasymachus is right, that Thrasymachus is ultimately, and Socrates basically agrees with Thrasymachus, but this is something you cannot say. This is the so-called esoteric, the dirty truths about truths. You can't. In other words, Thrasymachus's error is that he publicly proclaims what is true when it's not smart to do so. Now, this is my problem with that view. I think that is, I've always argued that yes, there is a truth that justice without power is not justice, right? This is that reality. Even Aristotle makes this. I got a Joshua, are you still planning your big book on Aristotle? Yes, I'm still doing that. That is going to be, I'm sorry to say, but it's been delayed because of some comments. It's going to be 2 books now because of this, I suspect. But that's another, I'll talk about that in a second. Let me finish the point I'm making here. That I think ultimately Thrasymachus, Socrates does not really agrees with Thrasymachus. He just knows that all 3 of these people make a valid claim about justice. That all 3 claims do hit a aspect of truth, are true, not completely, but in degree, about what justice is. Justice requires keeping, without keeping one word. In other words, these kind of things are preconditions. They're not the embodiment of what justice is, but they are the necessary preconditions by which justice is possible. Being faithful, keeping promises. Now, if you take this as the extreme of justice, it leads to contradictions. But without keeping faith and obligating things and being honest about running things, keeping faithful, then justice is meaningless. Same thing, helping friends and harming enemies. The friend's an enemy. Who's your friend and who's your enemy? Now, helping friends and harming enemies. But okay, what does that mean? What does it mean by help? Socrates is right. Is this always true? Because the question is that maybe helping an enemy may turn him into a friend, right? Therefore, who's an enemy, who's not, is a question of which that one needs to address and one needs to think about fundamentally. The other thing is the last one, Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus is partially right in this sense, right? In that without power, without might, there's no right. Might doesn't make right, but might without right is not right. Right. Okay. Might without right without might. Okay. Right. You can have might without right, but it's not right. Okay. It's not just. It's not right. It is unjust. Okay. But right without might is not right either, in the sense that it is unable to actualize itself. It is unable to deliver, and it's unable to do this. This is that famous line: "Justice without the sword isn't justice." Right? The image of justice we think of as the lady who's blind, carrying one hand has the weights, and the other the sword, right, or the sword on the ground, the sword and the scales, right. Might and justice. This is the symbolic aspects of it. Blind, so it's impartial. That of equity, that of force. So without coercion, without might, there is no justice. And so in that way, Thrasymachus is not totally incorrect. He's just incorrect in terms of making a total argument. And that's my point about this. And maybe, but maybe you don't need to do that now after you just did it here for us. Well, no, I'm going to do it with the reading through text. I'll go through the text, and we'll go through the text through this. And I think this is useful in that sense to understand that. Now, if someone says, "Why don't you do the whole Republic then?" I don't want to. I'm going to be, after October, I'm going to probably be doing the laws with a group of people. And I want to finish Rousseau. I want to do Rousseau. I promise some people I do Rousseau, and I'll do that. And maybe I want to do the Aristotle. That's the if I do something for the group, Aristotle will always know the Republic, or maybe my Machiavelli again. So those are the things I like to do. Now back to Joshua's chat here. Do you still plan on publishing your big book? And yes, I am. That's what I'm doing. I'm getting the chapters done. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but I'm doing that in that sense. It's a very difficult thing to do because, well, the publishers are kind of annoyed. And I think the problem was that getting some feedback forced me that book 5 was going to have to be treated separately. It could be much bigger than I thought it was going to be. And I want to get it done. So I got 4 and 6 I'll get done together. I just have to do the book 6, 3 chapters of 6, which is, I can do 4 now. It's mostly done. I could do 3 books, but that would be kind of pushing it. Say, why don't you do that? Why don't you just do book 4 and then book 5 and 6 together? Which is very much what most commentaries do. Yes, but I think 6. I really think 6 belongs with 4. The end of 4. I think 6 is the promised discussion of instituting regimes that he talks about in the beginning of 4. At 4, chapter 2, beginning of end of chapter 2 of book 4, he stops the account of the 6-fold account of regimes and saying, I'm not going to go there. Instead, I'm going to give my discussion about regimes, and he says about what he's going to do. Right? He basically spells out the remaining of 4, 5, and tradition of 4, 5, right? Because it says I'm going to be dealing with, the varieties of regimes and their sub-varieties. I'm going to be talking about the way the regimes are going to be the best practicable in general and best practical in most situations, how they're to be established in terms of that, and then how to deal with the destruction and preservation, right? And that's how you get that whole ending, right? Everyone looks at book, this is something that my buddy, I'm friends, Peter Simpson. Peter Simpson has always argued from the 90s onward that book 6 is kind of an appendix. It's kind of book 6 in politics is kind of an appendix. It's not. It's a kind of an epilogue onto it. It's like it's kind of some more additional thoughts kind of thing. I don't think so. I think he's wrong on that. I think Friedrich Schuschmel, in his edition, Germanic edition, mid to slightly less than mid, more than mid, German philologist and great, the guy who gives us with Emanuel Becker the critical Germanic edition of the politics with the new numbering system and ordering of the classical text. Schuschmel argues that Becker kind of argued that maybe the book should be moved. The argument of 4, 5, and 6 should come after 7 and 8. 7 and 8 should become 4 and 5, and that 4, 5, and 6 should become 6, 7, and 8. There's the whole discussion of the ordering of the books. Now, of course, it's it's more Schuschmel who do argue this in his edition, the German Greek edition, than does Bacher in his critical edition leaves it together. Now, Bacher will argue for this. Probably the best way to understand the text is to do this. That's in Jäger, Walter. It's William of Walter Jäger in his favorite Paideia, multiple 3-volume set Paideia. Right? He's famous for the interpretation of this. This most people say, Wagner, yeah, I guess wants to change it, but that's also Schuschmel who does this. In fact, Schuschmel's in Hicks ignores book 4, 5, and 6 in his edition. Schuschmel with his American English scholar Hicks does an edition of book 1 through 5, which is not 1 through 5, but it's 1, 2, 3. Traditionally 1, 2, 3 plus 7 and 8, the best regime, the IQ. And then he then says in the outline, he gives an outline of before he does the examination of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is his version of 4, 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8, right? Which is the normal ordering that he presents. He then gives kind of an outline of the politics before giving his examination of this and his notes and thing. He then says that, no. Okay, 4, 5. He gives 4, but then 6 really belongs after 4, at the end of 4, and that 5 is that there, and I think he's right there in that sense. I think 6 is about 6 kind of the end of 4 gives us a discussion about the division of labor, the division of function of that's not division of labor, but the division of labor and function of the offices in the city, right? The count of the offices in that sense, which is the embodiment of the institution of making it. They're going to make a city, you have to know the offices. So everyone says, well, that's the institution. I say, no, that's the first round. And then what he does is he gives the institutions and then gives specific regimes. And then he ends the account with a rethinking about another edition, addressing, that's 6, right? Book senses you have 5 chapters on, 5 chapters on democracy, the introduction of the thing, of introducing that, talking about democracy, and then 2 on oligarchy, and then 1 chapter, which is returning to the offices again. And that makes sense of the structure that does. So therefore, I would argue you should read 6 with 4. Some people have argued, now I understand this, some people argue, but no. I mean, actually, this was my original idea when I thought about it. In fact, I've changed my mind. My original idea was that, the original order made sense, that, and maybe it does still make sense, in the sense that the reason why you move it there is that you can't address foundations until you know change, and you can't really talk about establishing regimes until you know about change and preservation. to talk about establishing, and then before you deal with change and preservation. So maybe there's a good reason you need to interrupt and not follow the original plan. That's always the problem with Aristotle's account in book 6, is he sets up plans and then constantly deviates from them, right? He sets a pattern and then he doesn't continue to follow it. This is the same problem I had with book 4. Book 4 comes up this wonderful, book 4, we're promised a clear case of regimes, but we don't get something. We start out with he returns us to the sixfold typology and then dismisses it out of hand. He does it, he deconstructs again, and then he says, oh, no, let's start anew. And then he's starting anew. He says how he's going to go about this. He then says, okay, before that, I have to discuss the regime. And he gives a new, different account of the regime in the beginning of 4. It is the book 3 and 4. 4, he says, I must up a democracy. But no. Before that, I talk about the parts of the city. So, whoa. So instead of going into the variations of democracy, we get this long account of the parts that are essential to a democracy, to any, not only democracy, but to any city, to any regime, to understand the regime. So therefore, what sounds like it's very specific for the discussion of democracy isn't. Therefore, the introduction of democracy is then kind of abrupted, maybe, and this some people say, maybe you should take that out and move it. But no, but it's interesting that this happens in this way, right? And then what do we get? We get this weird thing of the account of the variation. The rest of half of 4 is the democracy, right? We get the restoration of democracy, right? Its variations, its 5 variations, original 5. And then we get an account of oligarchy and its 4 variations. And then we get a restatement of it that is in chapter 6 of book 4, where you get an account of 4 types of democracy, where what happens, the famous first account disappears and the first account gets that the second account becomes the new first account. And then, in other words, a reaccount of democracy, 4 types of democracy, and then 4 types of oligarchy. So you get a revision. So you're expecting the same thing to happen with, okay, I'm going to expect this. So maybe this is the many and the few, right? The many, the few, and the restatement of it. Well, isn't there the many and few of the best regime? Maybe we should do this, right? But the problem with this is he does give us 3 chapters on the so-called democracy and so, but then it's all mixed up, and we don't get the regime called regime separately from aristocracy. We get so-called aristocracy, and regime called regime all mixed up. We don't get a clear case of first the regime, then aristocracy. I think we started aristocracy first, if I'm not mistaken. I have to do this. I got 4 here. Let's look at it. 4, chapter 7. And he starts off, besides democracy and oligarchy, he says there's 2 sorts of regimes beside democracies, which are spoken of all, and we've spoken of earlier. One, the 4th kind of regime. The 4th they speak of are monarchy and oligarchy, democracy, and 4thly so-called aristocracy, right? And the 5th source, which is commonly called to common to all. So therefore, we're not going to speak of they speak of the 4, but they're not 4 not. But then we're going to speak of a 5th kind, right? So there's confusion here. So he says that it has become that the 5th sort, which is referred to. So the 4 originally tend to be the 4 remaining. We speak of 2. We spoke of democracy and oligarchy. So that monarchy, oligarchy, democracy, and a so-called aristocracy, right? But then this is what 4, right? 2 more. But no. There's a 5th sort, which is referred to by the term common to all. That is politeia, right? Politeia called politeia. But because it has not often existed, it is overlooked by those who undertake the examination of these things, and only 4 as Plato does. Right? He then defects to Plato, does 4, but then okay. So that's, we get that weird discussion of not the cycle of that. The only regime that is made up of those are the best simply based words. So it kind of doesn't really specify directly on this. He says, I want to talk about things, and I have to talk about two types. That is this regime, so-called aristocracy and so-called regime. And he goes like this. He goes in chapter 8, it remains for us to speak about each what is termed regime. So therefore we talk about aristocracy, right? So-called aristocracy, the argument suggests is. But okay, it's not clear because he talks about the aristocratic regime and the Spartan. He doesn't specify first one of its own. He constantly goes from one and the other, the so-called polity or so-called mixed regime, to the other one. And then chapter 8, he says, let's remind to speak up to regime. So I'm going to talk about regime now and tyranny, okay? And then he talks about regime, right, and the variations about this, the mixture of these two things. He starts doing it. He gives an account of this in 8, in that sense, the claims about it. But then what happens is we kind of get it, but we don't get a clear case of this, that it's always constantly being back and forth. That it was no longer about the many and the poor, but rather it's about whether it's the rich or the best ones, right? And that's okay. So therefore, it's a weird question, and therefore, what is called an aristocracy can also be blurred with what is called a politeia or a regime, politeical politeia, can also be called an aristocracy, aristocratic character. What? And that's the aristocratic character, which is again like Sparta and Carthage. So what was supposed to be the difference is that one is more like this and the other one is like that. Like one is more Carthage and one is more the oligarchy Carthage, and this the more soldierly one Sparta. The politeia thing like Sparta, but then again, it's remember that these the best polities that again. So and also remember we have to remember there's criticisms of Sparta, right, in book 2. So we get this weird situation here. In book 9, we get a discussion of okay. He says there's going to be 2 things left to do, right, and then only focuses on that. And then 9 is the manner of so-called regime comes into being besides democracy and oligarchy. Now we shall have to conform to what has been said, right? And he goes, and then argues the idea of mixing, right? Okay, there's going to be mixing of these different types of things. And this is where he kind of, chapter 9, he kind of rests mixing the first time. And some people say, well, you've talked about later? Yes, he talked about later again, but this is the confusing part. So is this the discussion of mixing here? Is this no longer a type of variation? Has he moved? It's confusing because we should have in other words, if we're used to the first pattern, we should see the repeat of the first pattern. We don't get a complete pattern. We don't get a democracy, oligarchy, and the merge of it. We get rather something blurred, something about that, and no account of, then we should have an account of that. We get blurred again, right? Something about 2 things. We don't get a full count of it. We get a second count, which is all about a little bit about, this is about this, but then it blurs it about aristocracy, aristocratic, and then the whole thing about mixing, a justification of it, which then is not only mixing, but wait a minute, this is not only true. I mean, this is the shocking thing. You could argue that the books in chapter 9, what is being discussed here is not only true about this specific regime called regime, but all regimes. Because all regimes are fundamentally a component, a construction of parts, and therefore mixed or blended in that sense. And then that leads to chapter 10, which is tyranny, and it's a small chapter. It's a 1-paragraph chapter that really doesn't go on to doing much, which is shocking in that regard, right? It's like, oh my God, shouldn't we get more here? No, nope, we don't. So chapter 1, paragraph thing. Tyrannies is given as such a brief thing. And then we get to chapter 11, the middle, the riddle, what I call the riddle of the middle. So again, this is why, oh my God, I gave you another discussion of Aristotle. Oh my God, this is, but explaining why the book is, I'm going to be doing that big book on Aristotle. I'm going to get to it. one of the things that came when I got back in middle, like, okay, Tuesday we came back. This was waiting for me. It's basically the thank. I have to thank. Who was it? It was. I think it was one of the editors, but which editor? I think it was not. I know. I think it was Hans Kuber on who I know through. I know Minkoff through friends. One of my people I know was kind of worked with him with the thing, and they did a book together. He's Iranian now, working elsewhere. I can never say his name right, but Hans Kuber befriended me on Twitter, and I complained about the thing, and I ordered the book. He gave me a discount. I tried using a discount, and the first the book they said didn't get. A big problem, and they tried to get me through that, but they said, okay, you can order it through the publisher directly. And the problem with that was having the press, which is Pennsylvania State University Press, send this directly was as much as the book. And the book was like, it was like $50, $40. And the book was, even with discount, it was back. You get the full price of the book again, $70. So it was like, oh, why bother? So he gave me the discount, and eventually the British UK guy fixed it. They sent it, so it only became the equivalent of like 260 zloty, with the discount because pounds, because it's like almost $100 in that sense, and it became like $50, $60. But then in pounds, there's a variation of pounds. You pay usually in pounds what you pay the amount in dollars. You adopt the bill. You don't pay the price and converted in that. No. They give you this usually about the same price, but in pounds, so you pay more for the book. Oh, because we're shipping it there. Yeah, that's just okay, whatever. And what's good about this is the notes from Strauss on the Euthyphro, with a very interesting thing. It has part one, which is Strauss on Euthyphro. This has two things: the notebooks on Euthyphro, and then the lecture of Euthyphro 52. The notebook by Strauss on the Euthyphro and the Credo. And then it has the Strauss's lecture on the Euthyphro that he gave 52. And then there's 4 appendixes. One, the selection of Strauss's notes on Euthyphro, some more notes. This is the Strauss's draft of his first lecture on Euthyphro from 1950. This is Strauss's outlines for a lecture on Euthyphro, and Strauss's marginalia in the Greek text of Euthyphro. In other words, the question of Strauss's marginalia. And then in 3 interpretive essays, one by Hans Kerber, Stefova Mingova, in other words, reading Strauss's notebook on Plato's Euthyphro, then comments on Strauss's notes on the Credo, and then Wayne Ambler on Introduction to Strauss's Plato's Euthyphro. And then last, translation of Euthyphro by South Benedetti, which is very interesting because it's the Greek with then the English right now, not different pages. It's literally like this. I'll show you. I'll just put on the screen. You can see it. It is the Greek and then in brackets, a translation of it by Benedetti. And this is very valuable things of those who are interested in Platonic scholarship. That's what I read this week. I'm rereading again, preparing for next week on Froggies from Aristophanes. And that kind of spells out my day. So I talked about some things. What are the things I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for my buddy. Okay, he's a buddy. We know each other, and we kind of Sometimes he gets mad at me when I say some anti-Jaffa stuff. Glenn Elmer's book, The Narrow Passage, which is on Plato, but also on Foucault. He's talking about Foucault. I want to read that. I'm waiting for that to come. I'm waiting for that volume of essays by the Claremont people that were published about conservatism. Where my friend from graduate school, Carlson Holloway, has an article on it, and the other people have articles on it. So I'm waiting for that book to come. It should be it took forever to get released in Europe. Okay, so it's like people have it already in America, but okay, I'm waiting for it. I ordered it. I didn't want to pay the big shipping prices and have to pay the import tax as well, the shipping prices for the U.S. It's arbitrary. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. I'm supposed to be teaching a course starting in September on European politics. They ordered the books. I had to buy the books, and they gave me the money for it. They're going to reimburse me. I had to order from Amazon 3 different journals with that, so I'm waiting for 2 textbooks on the course that I'm looking at. I haven't got the contract for the course. So I signed out the contract for my normal course, my historic diplomacy, which I normally do. So I'm waiting for that, and I'm waiting for those books to come. Those 2 books and that. And I'm also ordered a Montesquieu. I ordered a new Montesquieu. Oh, Montesquieu already out? No, Montesquieu, there's a collection of all the other essays in Montesquieu that's been published by Cambridge, which has his defense of the spirit of the laws, plus his thing on monarchy, and a couple other things by David Carruthers that everyone's talked about for decades. Paul Ray was talking about this for decades. And I've been waiting for decades, and I only discovered like today. It was published a year or so ago. No one told me. Oh no! So that's going to be interesting to get my hold of. I think I'll get it like Monday, Tuesday, and that's that. So we're early. I don't want to keep them. Maybe I'd go start today. So people, please do this. Remember again. You can follow me and like this, subscribe, get others to subscribe. If you've not done this, we only had 2 people watching. I should have put, hey, people, I'm having everyone's probably mad at me for last week, for not going live last week. But it was not going to happen because I was kind of, my wife wanted to do things on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening. And we were on the road when I was supposed to do this. So I did this, and I did a kind of a messing around that's recorded. Therefore, I hope next Friday to do a messing around live, maybe. We'll see how things are. We're going to be, Monday is going to be the monster 4 plus on book 28 of the Spirit of Laws, last part. On Thursday, on Wednesday, we should be looking at book 29, which I hope to record tomorrow in that sense. And then I need to, tomorrow I know I should be recording book chapter 4 and chapter 5 of Schmidt. Oh, there won't be any Schmidt recordings next week, so I have to get off my butt and do it. Like I said, today was destroyed. So I wasted an hour today. I had to sign on the computers again and do things. I didn't sign the computer on right away. No, I kind of was sick for 2 days. I was kind of not feeling the weather was been loud. I wasn't like really sick. I was just kind of like exhausted from the trip. And so you didn't do anything in the trip, my wife would say to me. But I just felt, the whole semester kind of like weighed on me. But that's that, and we'll see what happens. So therefore, I'm looking at this from the point of view of doing this tomorrow, doing the Schmidt stuff, and then maybe Sunday doing the last Montesquieu, because I have some leeway because Montesquieu's Wednesday. And maybe I'll finish up all the Schmidt tomorrow completely. We'll see. Because I have to do, I think it's 4 things left. It's not going to be that difficult to do it because I think I can do it, hour, maybe a couple hours. The 29, and then maybe Monday, Tuesday, I'll get 20 done, and I'll start thinking about 3031 done for Montesquieu, and I'll start thinking about getting the structure for this. I might not. I won't do book by book because it can't be done. There's only 4 books, and it would be too long. I don't want to make them longer. But if I do by chapter, like the politics, it might be too short too. So that's kind of weird because some chapters are very short. Well, we'll see what happens. I might just kind of break it up a little bit. Try to get it to have the organization structure something. Well, that's that. If you guys have any questions, that's the reading schedule. You can like it. If you like it, don't like it, whatever. If you not subscribe. Encourage others to subscribe to grow the channel. It's good to go to the channel, grow the channel a little bit. We've got 2 or 3 new people, so that's good, but I have to grow some more. So spread the news, be an evangelical. I should get, talk about people, some more things. If you have any ideas that you want me to talk about and things you want me to address and spending on a Friday and topics, please put them on there. It's important that people give me topics, because if you don't give me topics, I can't prepare for things in that sense. I want to prepare. The other thing is you can follow me on social media. The links are below. I'm more a Facebook person still. Yeah, but how if you survive Facebook? I've survived Facebook. How can that be? Maybe learning by the Straussian. That's it. No, but I'm the least esoteric guy. Maybe I back down and hold back things. I've been punished. I've been in Facebook jail like 4 or 5 times. I know people who's like every week, every month, but no. Some things sometimes you get stupid technical. Usually when I get a spank, it's because of the language. Oh, you can't use that language, but it's a metaphor. It's not a real threat. It's not a threat. That's why then I decided to use foreign language, and all of a sudden the thing doesn't understand it. You say something in French or German, then it not a threat. Something that would have been said in English, oh yeah, banned. German, French, or Greek, Latin or Greek. The censors have no fucking clue. So I've decided that if I'm going to say something that might get me in trouble in English, I'd say it in French or Latin, or use the metaphor. And that way you avoid getting in trouble. Well, that's it. You can follow my university links below too. The links, the things. Just who I am and what I do. Another thing you can do is help. You can do subscribe to our Patreon, but not, of course, no one does this. I understand why. You're giving it away. Why should you do this? Maybe I should say whatever. Or you can just send me more money. Send a bunch of money through Google Mail. Google email. Like, hey, okay, yes, please. I would love it. Or send them to my email through PayPal. That's another way people can do it. I don't know. People say, why don't you put a PayPal thing up there? It's too lazy. Ooh. Okay, well, that's it. Take care. We're at the hour mark, or a little bit below before it, but take care. Have a good weekend. Enjoy New August weekend. Hopefully I'll be here tomorrow and Saturday to do stuff. So take care. Bye-bye.